Hi there, I'm Coach Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And in this video, we're going to be talking to you about why your ex is silent, even though they're thinking about you.
Yeah, we're trying to understand it.
You know, going from being in a relationship where you're seeing somebody all the time, talking to them all the time, you feel a strong connection with them all the time, to complete silence is very jolting to you, your body, to your nervous system, apparently to my stomach and to my internal organs and everything connected. That may be a me thing, unless you're watching the video from the toilet.
Which probably a good percentage are.
Yeah. But you are just so convinced that if that period goes on for weeks or months, that your ex isn't thinking about you, that they've forgotten about you completely, and that is simply not true.
And we make so many assumptions when our ex is silent because we're not getting any input or any data or information on what's happening in their life. Our brain likes to fill in that blank space. Our brain likes to say, oh, they're, hanging out with new people, they're in a new relationship, or maybe we know that they're in a new relationship.
Yep.
We like to imagine what that's like because we want to have some semblance of control. We also want to still feel connected to our ex. We talk about that pain of separation and what that severing of the relationship is like, and we want to still be fused with our ex. We still want to feel close and connected. And so we try to think about, well, what could they be doing? Could this somehow be connected to me? Could they be thinking of me? Why are they so silent? So this time where you're not hearing from them can be really confusing, in addition to the anxiety that you're going through during the breakup.
Yeah.
So during the silence, we assume whatever we assume that is happening on the other end. Sometimes we even assume that nothing is happening. I think one of our worst fears in a breakup is that we'll be forgotten, or that the other person never truly cared or never truly loved us.
Or that no contact isn't working, right?
Yeah.
Because it often doesn't work as fast as you want it to work. And so in that time, yeah, it feels horrible, like it's never going to turn around.
And a breakup is a very emotional event. So if the two of you were attached, if the two of you were dating for a significant period of time, if the two of you were vulnerable with each other, it's very hard for me to believe that right after that, you're just going to completely displace yourself from the thoughts of the relationship. Now, people do a lot of wild things to not feel grief. People will distract themselves. People will be very impulsive to not feel grief. But as human beings, because we are connected to someone, it is very difficult to just completely forget about them the next second.
Yeah. And, it can be really tough because when you're saying about people being impulsive, and a lot of times they live in this fantasy and they jump to this new relationship right away, and they think it's going to magically be this perfect, amazing relationship. Well, they're in for a big surprise, because it usually doesn't last more than 4 or 5 months in that fantasy. Now, it can transition into something long term, but it's a real struggle to do so. And I think most of those rebound relationships don't make it to 6 months. I think they fall apart because the excitement, the play, pretend mindset, where it's not about I have to meet your needs, you have to meet not my needs, we have to work at this relationship. It's just, yay, fun and easygoing and no pressure, and we're attracted to each other. But it takes a lot to get beyond that.
Oh, yeah. If they're not and they're silent, you are probably trying to make sense of why aren't they reaching out. So we're going to talk about some of those reasons as to why they are silent, even if they are thinking about you, even if that grief does come up for them, and even if they do still have longing.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is they're afraid of leading you on. That's why they don't reach out. Okay? Think about it. If you've begged, pleaded, you wouldn't leave them alone, you're trying to change their mind, their fear is if you reach out, you're going to immediately go back into that kind of behavior, because many of you will, and many of you have. You've done it repeatedly. So that's why we're always telling you have to work on yourself in no contact and get to a good place where you're more confident and secure. Because if you don't, and they do reach out, they're going to feel very turned off by all the pressure. They're going to feel like, oh gosh, this was a mistake. So you have to understand you cannot look eager or desperate when they reach out, because that's what they're afraid you're going to do. They're afraid they're going to get stuck in this relationship. They're afraid they're going to hurt you again. They're going to reopen those old wounds. And so they would rather not reach out until it really builds up inside of them. But that is an opportunity for you to really grow and get to a good place where you don't make those same mistake behaviors like you did before.
And they're probably anticipating for you to bombard them and to try to convince them and have an agenda. I was thinking about this the other day. I was at some market, and I see people like beside their kiosk, selling what they're selling, hot sauce. I've been on a hot sauce crave or hummus or whatever health supplement. And as I was walking, you see them being very friendly, like hello, and very welcoming and warm and inviting. And I was thinking, this is probably what it's like for an ex in a breakup, is if I'm engaging too much with the person that's beyond the kiosk, I know I'm going to get stuck in a 5-minute conversation. I'm probably going to try some pretty good samples, but they're probably going to reel me into this conversation about whatever it is that they're selling.
I know what you're saying. I just happened to me recently. I went to the mall, and there was like one of those perfume stores in the middle, in the kiosk, and they're like trying to pull you in. And it's like you have to be like, they're like hello, and they're ready to jump at you, and I'm kind of like hi, and then I keep going. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be friendly, but I'm getting out of here.
Look really busy, or I mean, you could look like you have diarrhea and you're beelining it for the bathroom. No. It's that feeling of not necessarily having a judgment on whatever they're selling or doing, but just knowing, okay, if I start, if I reciprocate, if I engage too much, I'm going to be caught, and it's going to be harder for me to back out of this, or it's going to lead to an uncomfortable conversation or moment of, oh, sorry, no thanks. I tried your delicious hot sauce, but I'm not going to buy a bottle. So you're in that kind of awkward moment. And this is what that pressure can feel like for an ex, and a lot of times we almost set ourselves up in that situation because of how the breakup happens. We end up begging, pleading, and we give this impression that that's how we are going to react when we're around them. If we have another chance, we're going to act like it's our only chance, not in a good way, but in a bad way, of adding all of this pressure to the moment when, they might just be wanting to make their decision, and they're just kind of strolling along, trying to survive and make it through.
I have actually seen this in a lot of my calls recently, where when the ex is reaching out, they aren't able to keep that emotional self-control, and they're coming across as eager. I did a call with a woman today, talked to her ex for 7 hours. 7 hours when the ex reached out.
Do they have a job, or?
Apparently not. Their job is just talk about the breakup. I've had quite a few of my clients recently that when that moment comes, they're not holding it together. And many of them are really not committed to the personal growth. They're committed to obsessing about what their ex is doing on social media and stalking them on social media. When you do that, it's not setting you up for success. It makes you more anxious. And then when your ex reaches out, you're going to be more likely to make it fall apart.
And on the note of seeing what your ex is doing on social media, a lot of times we are seeing them having the time of their life. And we're thinking, okay, I haven't heard anything from them, but all I'm seeing are these posts of them in fun places, doing fun stuff. Like, of course they're not thinking of me. I'm just being delusional.
Yes.
And, we understand where that's coming from too, but we have to understand that during a breakup, when people are feeling highly emotional, they will do a lot of things to distract themselves from the feeling of grief and just to move on to the next thing. Making that decision and going through with the breakup decision is a hard thing to do. So them going through the separation elation, I finally was able to do this really difficult thing. I have this sense of freedom and I want to go do and explore all of these things. It doesn't mean that they just automatically never think of you again. It means that now they're distracting themselves, they're having fun, feeling independent, and that grief is still there lingering. They haven't fully experienced what it's been like to be without you. They're just experiencing what it's like to go through with that decision and experience some days without you, not longer term, and seeing what that's really like. And so that's important. I think of that phrase, like catch flights, not feelings. You see people like posting that after a breakup all the time with them on a flight to Cancun or
Meanwhile,
something.
they're crying on the plane.
Yeah, Yeah, so I think this can kind of be glamorized after a breakup as like, oh, forget the old, like in with the new. But grief doesn't work that way. Human emotions don't work that way. And it's typically a bit more complex. So, yeah. And they also may be predicting that the same things that happened in the relationship that led to the breakup will happen again.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take time for them to distance from that situation, to distance from the relationship enough to see it from a different perspective. Because they probably aren't convinced that if they were to get back together with you, that there would be a different result.
Sure. They know you really well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've done a lot of those similar behaviors over and over again, they have a strong idea how you're going to react or respond.
Mm-hmm. So they can miss you, but they might not be willing to reach out to you, have a conversation. They don't want to feel obligated into a commitment.
There's a lot of consequences, and they don't want to deal with them. Remember, especially when they're separated and elated.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with, oh, gosh, we're going to fight, and they're not going to leave me alone, and they're going to beg, and they're cry, and they don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. So the big point we're trying to make here is you don't always want to mistake someone's silence as indifference. You don't want to mistake their silence as, well, nothing's happening. You don't want to mistake their silence as they've completely eliminated me from their mind, because that's just not the reality of it. So the big point we're trying to get you to understand in this is to not mistake the silence for indifference, to not mistake the silence for, well, nothing's happening, or they don't care, or they've completely eliminated me from their mind, because that's just not the reality of it.
Yeah, it looks very different oftentimes than what may actually be going on. I know how tough that is, and I know it's hard to believe, and many of you are like, well, it's been months, they don't care about me. Until the day they reach out, I don't see you typing all those comments in the chat. Craig was right. They reached out. They told me how much they missed me and loved me. But it happens all the time. But you need the silence to do its job. And that is for them to experience the consequence, for them to experience the loss, for them to see what life is like without you, for them to actually feel like, oh, wow, you're not going to chase me. You're not going to keep begging me. I really have lost you. And all of the, negative feelings of the breakup to fade. All the things that you did at the time of the breakup can fade away, and it's not as intense. And they start to miss you and all the positive things that you did. And they look around the room and the stuff that you got them and the clothes that you bought them and the concert you took them to and all those nice things that you had where the nostalgia kicks in. It allows them to think, maybe I'm making a mistake. And, of course, they're scared when they do it, right?
Yeah.
And they reach out.
Yeah. And you have to let them reach out, because we don't want to underestimate the power of attachment here. There is a lot more going on than meets the eye. When they're silent, it doesn't just mean that nothing's happening. But we also don't want to assume, oh, well, they're silent, so they must be crazy about me. Let me reach out and make it easier for them. Right? The ball is still in their court. And like I had said earlier, you can miss somebody but not be willing to have a conversation with them. And where does that leave you? So we want to be realistic with you. Many times after a breakup, we almost force the doom and gloom onto ourselves, like, oh, they don't care, they've completely forgotten, and we try to convince ourselves of the worst case scenario. And we don't want you to be in that position either, because the reality is there are a lot of exes that do come back. There is the opportunity for repair in a lot of breakups, and we don't want you to overcompensate, reach out to them, force things. So the idea is, yes, they could have longing and grief and be missing you, but it's still their decision to reach out to you. It's still their decision to repair, and that may or may not happen. So we want to be real with you on that and help you see the full picture.
Yep. The ball is in their court. They ended the relationship. All they have to do is reach out. We're not telling you to ignore them. We're not telling you to wait for a meaningful text, because a lot of times they're just going to do an indirect direct. They're testing the waters. They're afraid you're going to reject them. But you want them to make that first move. I don't care how small it is. As long as they make that bid to connect, that is a big indicator to me that they're interested again. All right. So think about all this. And we constantly put out these videos because I cannot tell you how many people recently have been wanting to reach out to their ex. I've had so many clients of mine that are really struggling with their anxiety, and I keep trying to explain to them over and over again why it doesn't work out. And when they don't listen to me, they get ignored and then they feel worse.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, here's what happens. You guys think, okay, I know that if I reach out, I can say I'm finally done with it if they don't reply to me. That's not what happens. It's what you think is going to happen. And if this happened to you, share a comment, because what happens is you reach out and you think you're going to feel better, and then you get ignored and you feel worse. And now you think, I ruined my chances. I should have been patient.
Yeah. And we also want you to guard your heart in this too. You know, this person did make a decision, and if somebody's ambivalent, like if I was walking down the market and somebody at the kiosk is, getting in my face or whatever, then what's the natural response is then for them to become more defensive and upset too. So we want you to guard your heart. We don't want to set you up for rejection or put you in a position where now you're begging and, getting to a place where you're not feeling dignified in how you're approaching the breakup. We want you to feel good about how you approach the breakup and to feel like you're leaning more towards acceptance of what's happened.
Hopefully this one's been helpful to you. If you'd like to get our help personally, you can do that on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Zoom calls. Coach Victoria is also available for Zoom calls.
I'm here whenever you'd like to chat.
Just click on her name on the top of the website to schedule with her. That's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.